Hey everybody, this is Crystal. Welcome to my channel. Today's video is part of the Ugly Duckling Challenge hosted by Corey over at Desert DIY. In this challenge, we are to take an ugly piece of furniture and transform it into something beautiful. Here is my ugly duckling piece. It is this little side table. It's got a big old hole in it and it's like some weird faux leather type stuff. Originally, I wanted to work on this Hoosier cabinet and have this as my submission piece, but there's just simply not enough time to complete it. So I opted for a smaller item that was still pretty ugly. So here we go. I start by taking everything apart, and fortunately, it comes apart really easy. It's just going to make my life that much simpler when it comes to decoupaging the tops and the bottom. I don't have to work around all those little finial things. So I'm going to use some Bondo to fill that hole. And I have a piece of parchment paper that I'm putting on the bottom side of the hole so that way it kind of flattens out and pulls off easily. So I'm filling that hole with some Bondo, and Bondo is a two-part mixture. So once it hardens, I'm going to go through and I'm going to sand everything. So I'm going to sand down that Bondo to smooth it out, and then I'm going to sand all of my wood and my tops and everything like that to give my piece a nice surface that my paint will adhere to, something for it to grip onto, like a nice roughed up surface. I used my sander for the top and the bottom piece of this table, and then I just went and hand sanded all of the finials and the spindles and the legs and everything like that. Just was a little bit easier to do than trying to work with my sander around those rounded surfaces. And then I cleaned everything really well. So I'm using a Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis brand paint, and I am adding 2 coats of paint to the top and the bottom, and that seemed to be enough. It has some really good coverage. And then on my spindles, I did do roughly 3. My plan is to decoupage these napkins on the top and the bottom of the table. I'm taking an iron and I'm just smoothing out the wrinkles that are in the napkin. And these are a 2-ply napkin, so I did take off of the back of the napkin and it just separates really easily. You just pull them apart and you have your top piece with the pattern on it and then the bottom piece, which is usually just white. So I discarded the white and I'm using the top part with my pattern to decoupage my table. I love these napkins. I think they're so cute, but I bought them so long ago. I cannot even remember where I got them, but I will try and do some research so I can put that link down below if they're even still available. I have this DIY paint and it's actually a mist tint color. So unfortunately, I cannot provide you with this in a link either because I purchased this as a mist tint from the lab is what it is called. So this is not a color that they carry in stock. And I'm just taking this and I am kind of dry brushing on my spindles and my finials and my legs just to add a little bit of highlights to everything. And I'm going to use some Elmer's glue to decoupage my napkins. I didn't have any Mod Podge or any other medium laying around, but I do have 4 kids, so I always have some type of Elmer's glue laying around. I'm adding some water to thin it all down. You just want it kind of watery, so mix it really, really well together. Get all that water mixed into your glue before you use it. Before I start going to town and decoupage and everything, I do kind of lay out my napkins to figure out how I want them to sit. I did end up removing one of my napkins because my birds were upside down. So even sometimes dry fitting it doesn't always, you don't always catch things. So I'm just using a chip brush and I'm applying my Elmer's glue. And yeah, you just want it kind of, you don't want it too thick. You just want it thin and even as possible before you apply your napkins. So these napkins are super thin, so I'm trying to be really careful with them when I'm laying them out and placing them. They tear really easy. And I'm using some crumpled up plastic wrap to smooth out all my wrinkles. This is the first time I used the plastic wrap, and it works really good. So I highly suggest you use that next time you are decoupaging with napkins. It did help get out of a lot of the wrinkles. Now, it did not get all of the wrinkles out, which I'm okay with. I'm not a perfectionist and I don't need everything to be completely smooth and all of that. So, and I'm just going to embrace the wrinkles that are left there. If you haven't noticed, this is the piece that I end up taking off and replacing because my birds are upside down. So, yeah, anyways, when you are putting on your other napkin, just try and line up your seams and you have a pattern on your napkin. So, I'm just trying to fit the pattern together so that it makes sense and it looks like it kind of flows smoothly, even though it technically it doesn't. It's not how the pattern's supposed to look, but I'm kind of matching it up best as I can. And then because this napkin didn't completely cover all of my top and there's some exposed edges, I'm just taking my Wise Owl chalk synthesis paint and I'm tapping around the edges where the table is exposed and where the napkin didn't cover. That way it's just kind of all blending and flowing together nicely. And then because you can still sort of see my napkin seam and you can see there's a couple areas where my pattern doesn't match up completely. I'm just taking that Wise Owl chalk synthesis paint and I'm just tapping all around. So everything, I can kind of hide and conceal certain areas where my pattern doesn't match up and I can kind of conceal that seam a little bit and everything kind of blends together and it doesn't look like such a pieced in hot mess. I'm using a Waverly white wax and a sock, and I'm using that to seal my paints on my legs and my spindles and my finial thingies. Yeah, and it just kind of adds just another layer to it. I think it looks really pretty. It's really important to wait for everything to dry completely, and I'll show you that here in a second. But once everything is dried, you can then take a piece of sandpaper or sanding sponge and then kind of gently go over the edges, and then you can tear off your decoupage paper, or in my case, a decoupage napkin. And then taking my sandpaper, and I'm actually using a 400 grit sandpaper, but you can see right here, as I'm going over my napkin, because when it dries, the wrinkles that are there kind of harden. There was one spot that was not completely dry. So it just pulled it right off of the table. So I'm taking some of my Wise Owl chalk synthesis paint, and I'm just kind of tapping it in there to blend everything together and just kind of make it look like the tear or rip never even happened. But that is why it's really important to wait for it to dry completely, because if you don't, it tears super easy when it is still wet. Once I'm finished sanding down my napkin and getting all the hard areas smoothed out, getting it completely smooth, I use a water-based polyurethane by Verathane, and I'm just brushing it on, and I did 2 coats of the polyurethane. Now it is time to put everything back together. It's almost finished, and I think it's looking great. Although I do end up running into another problem. There was like a little metal piece that the leg screws up into that had pulled out of my spindle. So I'm using some E6000 glue, and I'm filling up that hole, and I'm going to take that little metal piece and pop it back in there, tap it in with a hammer, and then I'm going to let it dry, and then I can put everything back together. Huge thank you to Corey over at Desert DIY for hosting this fun challenge. I really love doing these challenges. They are so fun to do. I will link Corey's channel down below, as well as the playlist of all the other amazing content creators that will be joining this challenge. You are not going to want to miss it. Let's have a quick look of the before of my ugly duckling. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something, and I also hope you subscribe. Thank you guys so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.